It's January 26, 2017. Another blistering hot Australia Day in Perth, Western Australia. 229 years on since the arrival of the First Fleet at Sydney Cove, families have gathered along the Swan River to reflect on what we've achieved and celebrate what we've become. A prosperous and successful nation, a role model of the developed world. But not everyone feels the same way. For many Indigenous Australians, this is not a day for celebration, but a day for mourning their loss of sovereignty over a nation they had inhabited for over 50,000 years, and the subsequent annihilation of their ancestors that took place. But this year is different. In an unprecedented move, the neighbouring city of Fremantle made the decision to cancel its traditional celebrations on the 26th for what it describes as a culturally inclusive celebration 2 days later. This escalated the issue to new levels of tension. More than anything though, it shows that on a day that's supposed to unite us, we are divided as ever. A rising sentiment of nationalism throughout the Western world is putting the spotlight on the far right. Political groups previously regarded too extreme to receive any attention from the mainstream have suddenly emerged as real political players. One such group is Rise Up Australia. They push for Christian values and strongly oppose multiculturalism.
I was very disappointed, to be honest with you, when I heard that they had cancelled the Australia Day celebrations. My take on this is very different, possibly from many others. I come from the nation of Sri Lanka originally. The Brits came into Sri Lanka. I don't see it as a day of invading Sri Lanka. I see it as a day that they actually brought life back into Sri Lanka. I would call it a redemptive day or blessed day, because the Brits coming in had its negative effects, no question. But by and large, there were roads built, tea plantations built. The country was put into a very good place. Likewise, if the Brits had not come to Australia possibly could be an Islamic country today. We would not have the democracy and the freedoms we have right now. I've spoken to many Indigenous people because I share the same skin color. And as we explain it to them, they understand that it was more blessing than a problem. Yes, it's true there was injustice done, but I think Australia Day has to be kept Australia Day and we should celebrate it all together. For how long are we going to be feeling resentment and live in our own little pit that we are in? It's time to really come out of it. So many immigrants coming from so many countries can get their lives sorted out here. I'm sure people who are Indigenous also could get that sorted out. It's one thing to say, oh, poor me, look at me, what's happened to me 200 years ago. Or I'll say, yes, it's happened. I know there was injustice done, but today it's a new day, it's a new season. I'm going to make it happen and come out of that crutches of, poor me mentality. I think one thing to break is not to listen to these politicians who are playing that to the advantage of their own benefits. For example, there are many Indigenous people I've spoken to have no problem with what happened. Yes, it's happened. They understand it, it's over, it's done with, they're moving forward. But there's a group of people in every community who likes to keep the issue going. And I think it's mainly fueled by the lefties in Australia who like some issue to keep it rolling over and over again. And I think it's time to just get out of it and just get alive.
As an Aboriginal woman, a Noongar woman specifically, I felt really proud of my council, the local council from the country that I come from. Across all of Australia made the decision to make historic change. And it makes me feel proud that there are forward thinkers and brave people who are not afraid to be hated, to, think about acknowledging and understanding some of the pain that my people go through in remembering that day. We as Aboriginal people, we carry our people's pain. We have some of the lowest health, housing, we have some of the highest jail rates in the world, some of the highest suicide rates in the world, and that didn't just happen for the sake of happening. It's a direct result of the white Australia policy and the unjust things that the Australian government has done to my people. And it takes generations to heal trauma, and we are not there. It is still fresh, it's on the surface. We all carry our people's pain. And, you know, like, it is painful. Like, I am a strong black woman, Noongar woman, but I cry all the time for my people. You know, I've had suicides in my family. I've had a murder of my nephew that we didn't get any justice for. You know, I've had to listen to my grandmother's stories of the terrible things inflicted upon her, my uncles and aunties. You know, these are my family stories. If they were your family stories, would you be able to forget about it? Would you be okay with people saying, why don't you just forget about it and move on? How would your heart feel? Because I tell you what, my heart aches for my people. And it does take generations to heal trauma. That's not to say we're going to be like this forever, but it takes generations to heal trauma, and people need to understand that.
This country's been invaded. We've been here 60,000 plus years. The oldest people and the oldest culture in the world. We survived the massacres and the genocide of the Australian government. And
Similar feelings are shared and expressed by much of the Indigenous community.
It's our responsibility to say we don't just want to change a date or something like that. We want to actually get to the heart of the thing.
Sam Wainwright, a member on the Fremantle Council, had much involvement in the controversial decision to introduce an alternative date of celebration. Sam is also a prominent member of Socialist Alliance, a political party on the far left that in Perth has been proactive in drumming up support for the date change movement and other causes like refugee rights. They provide a stark contrast to parties like Rise Up and the more prominent One Nation Party led by Pauline Hanson. While some see her as a voice for ordinary Australians in a climate of political correctness, others feel differently.
I know she is extremely racist herself, but the fact that she's cynically using the fear that's going across the world at the moment to get into a position of power, I think is disgusting.
They're definitely racist towards Muslims. Pauline Hanson has a whole history of anti-Asian racism and anti-Aboriginal racism. I'm sure she still thinks a lot of those things.
She's more energy than you'd believe. She's absolutely amazing. White people came and they took the country. I find it hard today to understand how the English could place their law on the people that lived in this country. I mean, white people were dragged across from England for stealing, taking a rich person's handkerchief or being rude or pinching a loaf of bread. In some cases, murder, some of the later convicts that came to Perth. But then the blackfellas were carried around the state in chains and marched from here to there and stored in prison trees at Wyndham and Derby and then incarcerated at Rotto. They've got to close the quad, out of respect especially. But when do we move on? When do we become one people? Australia Day hopefully can become a symbol for us joining together and become a nation if the Indigenous folk are prepared to accept it.
The city of Fremantle has stirred more controversy for its decision to push back Australia Day celebrations 2 days. Assistant Immigration Minister Alex Hall has written to inform the council that they won't be allowed to hold their Australian citizenship ceremony on the 28th. Last month, the city announced its plans, saying that Australia Day fireworks are insensitive to Indigenous Australians. The Premier has weighed in, however, labelling the council's decisions as selfish and un-Australian.
The city of Fremantle had been, ridiculed and vilified and attacked for the decision that we took, and the Mayor in particular bore the brunt of that. As an aside, I should say, did a fantastic job at standing up to that. And so to have, over 15,000 people turn up to the event, we don't pretend that it shows that everyone agrees with us, but nonetheless, we took as a real kind of vindication and a sign that there are a lot of people in the community that feel the same way.
The way we've seen it is it's a conversation. And look, maybe I can answer that partly by telling my own story, because if you'd have asked me this question around should we change the date of Australia Day a couple of years ago, I would have went, I hadn't really thought about it, why? And the journey that I went on, speaking with local Aboriginal elders, really actually probably thinking about the issue and then realising actually, we really need to change the date. But look, there's a journey you've got to go on to actually kind of understand the issues and understanding what that date represents for many Aboriginal people. Look, it will be a process, but Australians are smart, and once they've thought through the issue, I think the majority of them will go, yeah, actually this makes sense. We want a day where everyone can celebrate.
Aboriginal Australians aren't just another minority. They're part of the longest continuing culture in human history, and to properly include them in the modern Australian nation means acknowledging their history, acknowledging their dispossession, and saying, and acknowledging the wrongs of the past. Not beating ourselves up, but acknowledging them and saying we want to create a better future together. Our decision reflects a belief that January 26 is itself inherently divisive. And there's no way you can paper over that. You can only pretend it's not divisive by playing down the reality of Indigenous dispossession. And we don't need to do that anymore.
Come the following year, and Australia Day, along with the controversy surrounding it, makes a return. Self-proclaimed patriots make their opposition to date change well known.
Whilst we recognise the painful past that started this nation, we continue to move forward and recognise the great this nation has done.
While Invasion Day protesters in Perth and across the nation make it clear, this is not an issue that will be forgotten anytime soon.
We are not telling you not to celebrate your Australia Day. We're asking you to look at why you are celebrating it, and we're asking you to walk with us to truly create something to celebrate. That's what we want from you.
With other local councils around the nation now following Fremantle's lead, the raging debate on whether or not the date needs to be changed will inevitably return every year until a solution is found.
Can we do this again next year?
I reckon we can. What do you reckon?
But what is the solution? How do we heal the divide and move forward together as one?